Welcome to Rob Schmitt tonight. The heads of two major committees intent on exposing Joe Biden's corrupt past join me here in just a few minutes as we prepare to hear from two IRS whistleblowers tomorrow. Gary Shapley, who headed the IRS team which claims the DOJ subverted their investigation, and a second unnamed agent who started the Biden investigation, an agent who describes himself as a gay Democrat. Recently, these two spoke out, alleging the Department of Justice was obstructing an investigation that was leading them toward the biggest political corruption scandal this country has ever seen. In response, Biden's Department of Justice removed the entire IRS team from Hunter Biden's case. The kind of move you'd see in a third world country where corrupt leaders are protected by the government that they control. Because this all happened under Joe Biden, it was largely unreported. A story that details that deserve the same caliber of coverage as Watergate got, if not more. Suppressed by a spineless media which has been completely devoured by establishment Washington in the years since Donald Trump arrived on the scene. The American media has now been repurposed as sponsors of official propaganda. For the most part, government tells the media what to say, and the media complies. There are rare exceptions, though, and we give credit where it's due. For years, CBS attempted to avoid the Biden corruption scandal, ignoring a mountain of salacious evidence that journalists are typically starved for. But CBS eventually caved when it became so obvious they were protecting the president. CBS put IRS whistleblower Gary Shapley on TV earlier this year, and Shapley said this.
There were certain investigative steps that we weren't allowed to take that could have led us to President Biden.
And you wanted to take them?
We needed to take them.
And you weren't allowed to take them?
That's correct.
That is an astonishing claim. The Department of Justice, now run by Biden acolyte Merrick Garland, preventing agents from exposing Joe Biden's corruption. IRS agents discovering evidence like 20 shell companies that were opened by the Bidens. 16 of them were opened when Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, as House oversight confirmed through bank records. Top DOJ officials knew exactly why a vice president would need to open 16 shell corporations to funnel money from other countries to family members. You'd have to be brain dead to not understand what Joe Biden has been doing with his power. Biden was never smart enough to really hide it. We all know that. Lately, Trump's been telling an old story about Ted Kennedy, who told Trump years ago this about our current president.
Who's the dumbest in the Senate? He goes, let's see, probably Joe. I said, Joe who? Joe Biden. He's the dumbest in the Senate. Now, that was by Ted Kennedy. Now, they'll go crazy. They'll say, oh, that's terrible. But he said this, and this was prime time. This wasn't now.
So if you believe Ted Kennedy, you'd have to say dumb and also arrogant are bad qualities to mix. We know Joe Biden has the latter. And Joe Biden is a lethal combination of both. Biden assumed his last term with Obama was likely time to cash in, and the influence peddling ramped up. Millions from a corrupt Ukrainian, millions from a corrupt Romanian, and millions from Chinese communists to push the agenda of our greatest rival inside the United States. And as Biden's biggest supporters, the establishment media, largely either ignore this story or just try to suppress it, tirelessly working to marginalize it, an FBI whistleblower is now confirming key portions of the IRS whistleblower's testimony, confirming DOJ operators prevented investigators from actually interviewing Hunter Biden. Maybe the most damaging evidence of all are the president's own words on this. We know Joe Biden was in on the Chinese meetings. Hunter's business partners told us that. The founder of Burisma Energy told us he paid $5 million personally to Joe Biden, in addition to millions more to Hunter. Biden met with Hunter's business partner 2 weeks before Hunter took the job with Burisma. But before we knew all of this, this is how Joe Biden sounded when he was asked about what his son did for work.
I don't know what he was doing. I know he was on the board. I found out he was on the board after he was on the board, and that was it.
And I didn't realize he was on the board till after he'd been on the board. And at the same time, he has come forward and said it was a mistake on his part to be on the board.
put all that together and it tells a pretty clear story, I'd say. Wall Street Journal columnist Kimberly Strassel is one of the best minds on all of this. She's also the author of the book Biden Malaise, which is just coming out now. Thank you so much for coming on.
It's great to be here, Rob. Thanks.
Appreciate it. What the Bidens have been doing, what the president had been doing while he was vice president, years after the vice presidency, it's very obvious, I think, to most people when they look at the story now. But tomorrow we're going to really learn how far our government was willing to go to suppress that from the American people, to hide that for obvious political reasons. What are you expecting to hear tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm expecting to get a lot more than what we've had. And here's why. If you think about it, both of these whistleblowers sat for private testimony behind closed doors with investigators. But when you do those kind of questionings, they run through a list of questions. They might try to do follow-ups. But it's only after the fact, when they've had time to go back and read through the full 300 pages of testimony, that they finally can say, now we're going to drill down on some stuff. So expect some big details to come out tomorrow.
I would hope to see, we're hoping all to learn a lot more, because the allegations are so huge and they're coming from just so many different various sources. I mean, you've got obviously there's a guy that says he's a Democrat, one of the IRS agents, the FBI whistleblowers confirming it. You've got Hunter's business partners. You have all these people confirming what the Bidens were doing and now the suppression of it. It's got to be, I want to ask your opinion on this. Watergate was the story that the journalists always go back to, right? Is probably the biggest scandal the country had ever seen.
Scandal.
And when I look at the details of Watergate compared to the details of this, I think that this marginalizes Watergate quite a bit. What do you say?
I think it at least rivals it, okay?
Yeah.
I'll put it there. And by the way, one other thing just to say about these whistleblowers that I think doesn't get enough attention and how important it is. They have completely corroborated each other, okay?
Exactly.
In minute detail over hours of testimony, and that really adds to their credibility. But on the Watergate point, I also don't know how I would weigh it up between this and the Trump-Russia collusion hoax as well, too.
Right.
Which also came out of the Department of Justice, a scandal for the ages, the FBI using a fake dossier paid for by the rival campaign and then covering it up. The cover-up was also really important here. And we're also seeing this now, too. Yeah. I do not know how U.S. Attorney David Weiss is going to get out of this situation, given the testimony of these people.
It seems like he might be testifying soon, too, which makes me, he's obviously going to protect the DOJ. That's what he's been doing so far. We'll see.
And the most amazing thing is we would know none of this if it weren't for these whistleblowers.
Right.
And that's what they were depending on.
Because we don't have a media anymore.
Right.
This is what you need. You need whistleblowers to come out. I want to show a clip. I want to talk about Trump here for a second. This is historian Michael Beschloss on MSNBC this morning on Trump's plan to rein in this unelected bureaucracy that's really controlling our government. Take a listen to how MSNBC puts it.
If you love Mussolini, you will love what Donald Trump is talking about for 2025. The first major candidate in American history to say outright, I want a presidential dictatorship.
Trump wants to just kind of rein in this unelected bureaucracy that really controls our government.
The fourth branch?
It certainly needs to happen. This is how they're spinning it on it. What do you say to a claim like that?
Well, one thing I would point about this in terms of Beschloss is how everybody focuses on Trump. If you look at the whole Republican field, every one of them now understands that this is one of the biggest problems we have in government. Okay, by the way, also the Supreme Court understands it. Look at the opinions that have been coming out, which have been deliberately aimed at reining in this bureaucracy that's no longer following the rules.
Right.
And most of them are all making plans for how you're going to drain the swamp. And from everything from maybe federal unionization and their rules all the way to Vivek Ramaswamy, who's saying we need to get rid of entire departments of government. Okay, people saying we need to get rid of the FBI and put something in its place. So to focus on him, it's crazy. And the notion that we're just supposed to sit around and let this bureaucracy run the show, nameless, faceless, unelected people, and that the elected people can have nothing to do with it, that's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. You've got a book coming out.
I do.
The Biden Malaise. There it is on the screen right there. Tell us about the book.
So the book, it's super fun. It is, on its face, it's a comparison between the Biden years and the Carter years. Because in some ways, that comparison is striking. Inflation, energy prices, foreign policy debacles. A lot of people don't know this. They had the same immigration problem. Carter's the only other president to have a run at the border via the Mariel boat lift out of Cuba. Crime. But the fun of the book is most of it is dedicating to making the case for why all that comparison is unfair to Jimmy Carter.
Now that is funny. And you're right, they're like mirror presidencies. I mean, they look very similar.
They
in a lot of
do,
different
but
ways.
you know, Jimmy Carter inherited a lot of his problems. Joe Biden got a clean slate. He messed it up.
Well said. Kim Strassel from the Wall Street Journal.
Thank
Always
you.
good to see you. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for
We
having me
appreciate
on,
it.
Rob.
All right.